Lizzie Hamblin is a lead UI designer at Drum Studios. It's a digital emotion agency focused on sustainability and accessible digital marketing. I'm super excited because Lizzie's also one of our alumni from our Designing Product Experiments courses. So it's really great to have her here speaking. She's passionate about sustainability, geeking out about Tai Chi, and likes hanging upside down in aerial hoops. So with no further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Lizzie.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming. Yeah, it's great for me to be able to talk to you all about one of my favorite topics that I'm really passionate about. And I also think in some ways, for me, my own learning journey has been that it was all quite invisible to me before. So I'm hoping I can make the sort of sustainable web design part a bit more visible for you today as I run through our case study. So I'll just share my screen. Okay, so recently we decided at our agency to primarily focus on sustainability and accessibility, and we decided therefore to redo our website and be in line with our values really. And I'm going to start with a poll. What do you think? Do you think aviation or the internet produces more CO2 emissions? We'll just see what everybody thinks, because this is one of the first things that I came across when I was sort of researching. So yeah, it looks like we've got a clear majority here that a lot of people do know that it is the internet. So yeah, this came as a real surprise to me when I first started researching about sustainable web design. A few years back, I kind of came across it and I was talking with a developer about it. I really didn't have any idea that there was a carbon footprint when we design a website. But yeah, it's even more than aviation is producing and it's predicted to grow. So we've got quite a big problem that we really need to solve. And a lot of that comes from the need to cool down the servers in data centers where all of our content is being hosted. So yeah, quite a big problem. So with our new website, we managed to get the carbon down to 0.13 grams per view, which is considered a low carbon score. And I'll run through about the scoring in a bit. And we also focus on getting the accessibility to 100% because we just wanted everybody to be able to use it as much as possible. In terms of the structure of how we're working, we're now in our first sprint, so we're always working to improve it. And every sprint, we're choosing one main thing that we can improve on accessibility and one main thing we can improve on sustainability. So to put the figures in context, our old site had 1.65 grams of carbon per view, which was really high. Looking at that in comparison, so the median is around 0.5 grams, and the new, it's a lot lower. So for us, yeah, it's just been such a big shift to get to that score, and we want to get it lower still. So to put that in a bit more context, with around 1,000 page views a month, that means per year it's 1.5 grams of kilograms of carbon, which could be absorbed by one tree. Our site is very small, so I think what I want to highlight here is that the scores are all quite relative to the project. So our site is very small. You know, it's an agency site, it's a portfolio site. Whereas Google, for example, they've got a much lower score, but they have 1.2 trillion searches per year. So for them, they might not be celebrating at that sort of score because it adds up to so much tons per year. And they're actively always working to get that lower. Unfortunately, they've got the budget and the power to kind of invest in technologies, and they're doing things with, heat storage into sand, kind of new tech. So this is just to highlight really that it's all very relative to your project. The ways that we went about measuring it, we're using some of these tools. So there's website carbon calculator, EcoGrader. There's also a Chrome extension that we've just come across as well. So those will all start to help you understand like what your carbon is, roughly. And things like EcoGrader also pull in from Google Lighthouse, so that will give you, quite specific points that you can improve on, which is really helpful. So we started by, finding out our scores on the old site, and then looking into some of the issues that were highlighted. And then site performance is another one. So you can use Google Lighthouse to look at this. You can look at your desktop and your mobile, and it will let you break it down, performance and accessibility and various other things that will let you know your site speed. So yeah, we also use this for a bit of auditing as well. So the page speed particularly was a problem for us because our previous site, being an agency site, we kind of, especially where we specialize in motion and video as well, like our old site was very much all singing, all dancing, trying to be very creative, and that gave quite a slow site because there were a lot of things slowing it down. So 2.4 seconds to load it was pretty slow. So the longer it takes, the more energy is being used. The new site we've got down to 0.5 seconds. So yeah, you want to get the content loading as quickly as possible. And this is where UX comes in really, that the quicker people can complete tasks, that's the less time they're on the site, that's more, less energy used. And in terms of we've got quite a lot of UX designers in the crowd. So some of what I'm talking about, I'm sure you'll be thinking, oh, that was UX, but now you can also know that that's good for the environment as well. It's kind of everything coming together really. And also gives you more selling points if you're trying to convince, different people in organizations and companies. If you can also promote, okay, we want to do this and make it better for the user, you can also bring in the environment as well, because it all does really come together, really. So some of the problems we had with the old site, we had a horizontal design, so it was quite experimental, and that made the build quite heavy and complicated. We had a lot of animated content, like I mentioned before, and very image heavy, lots of JavaScript, and all of that uses quite a lot of energy. When I was kind of putting this together, I realized it was easier almost to say what we didn't do than what we did, because what we did do is very simple. So some things that we deliberately chose not to do, video backgrounds, they use more energy. They're not always the best for accessibility either. I think, as we know, videos well placed in certain scenarios, but I think in terms of backgrounds, it can be a bit overused, and it's using power. And then larger areas of imagery, I think where our old site, we had everything kind of max size, full width, full height. We've avoided JavaScript animation. There's lots of really cool effects out there, like you'll see on sites like awards. Lots of JavaScript animation, image effects, and they use a lot of energy. They might look creatively cool, but at the same time, they're also not that accessible at times. Multiple pop-ups, we all kind of hate these anyway. And it's normally a war between marketing and UX and various people, and it won't be a surprise. The more pop-ups you've got, it's not just annoying for the user, they're also using energy. Sometimes they're using plugins. yeah, again, multiple plugins. So we wanted to keep it to a minimum. Like, we don't actually have a social plugin on our site. We have a live chat plugin that we're using, but we just really have kept them to the minimum. A few other design choices like no parallax, no gradients. I'll touch on gradients in a little bit. No carousels. Again, we don't particularly like them in UX anyway. And then WebGL 3D graphics is probably one of the worst offenders, and it's almost like going and torching a forest, really. They use up so much energy, and they have really, really high carbon scores, and they're very popular. All these sort of really cool 3D interactive animation experiences you come across on sites. Yeah, they just use so much energy and power, and they're not great for accessibility either. So yeah, we definitely avoided those. What we did do, very simple layout, and it was deliberately designed in mind that we're going to be iterating it quickly and regularly. So we wanted, there's quite a lot of text areas where we can make changes quickly. Really simple layouts, nothing too offset and animated, just kept it really simple. 2 or 3 column layouts, quite fairly more small image tiles, especially as where we're promoting our work, and that's quite a visual thing at times. So keeping imagery and animation minimal. We do have some animation, and again, I think those are things that we'll be looking at in sprints to kind of reduce down more. We went for a custom CMS, and what that means with the content managed system, that we could have only what we actually need. So we used an October CMS, is one that we use. So our developers only installed the specific sections that we actually need rather than the whole thing, which that saves a lot of energy as well. And then lazy loading worked amazing for us. So that really did shift the carbon a lot. So that's when you're only loading the assets when the user's actually in that section of the website. So for example, where we've got those image tiles, they'll only be loading when the user is in that area. Then once they scroll past, they disappear. So that means you're only ever using that energy for that short time. Copywriting. So we actually went for the idea of bringing out our brand personality more through short and snappy copy, because then it wouldn't be very image heavy. We also wanted things that will still work in a screen reader. So if before it was all very image led and visual led, animation led, to someone using a screen reader, their experience of our brand was very limited, whereas now they're getting a lot more of our brand personality through what we're saying, and it doesn't need to change in that way. So a little bit of maths here, but we did use emojis sparingly, where previously perhaps we would have maybe, for example, videos and animation at Punch, we might have had an animated graphic with that, but that emoji is roughly around 4 bytes. So that's, a kilobyte is 1,000 bytes. So it's really, really tiny compared to what we may have done before. Like if we'd done an animation, that could have been like 500 kilobytes or even a megabyte. We also used HTML arrows. So again, they're really tiny compared to previously I've normally created an SVG, for example. So this is rough maths. We think it's roughly right, but the difference in terms of the size, like it is a lot smaller. So that's another way that we save kilobytes. So I just thought I'd touch on image file formats, because when I first started out in design, this is something I used to get wrong all the time. And the developer kind of pointed it out to me. And I just thought I'd cover a few different ones. So on the left, we've got the more graphical one where you've got flat colors. So after compression, I got that asset down. So if it would be a WebP, it would be 4 kilobytes. PNG 5, JPEG is 11. So a JPEG is almost double. And And I used to often export things as JPEG when they should have been PNG and vice versa. So really, if it's more graphical, you want to be going for a PNG. And then the image of our office, detailed images, if you go PNG for those, they'll be higher. And sorry if this is really obvious for some, but for some it won't be at all. So I thought I really want to include this because you can save so many kilobytes doing this. Just a note on WebPs, they go a lot smaller. Not all browsers support them, so it's something you can have a chat with your developers about. Or if you're with a template site, you contact the support team and ask them about it, because some CMSs will compress it and convert it, some won't. Or your developer might want you to give you both, and then they'll sort it out for you. So it just depends on the scenario, really. Gradients do increase file size. So we've just had this massive trend in gradients here, there, and everywhere. I think it's kind of coming to an end now anyway, but it does push the file size up. So we went for quite flat color graphics, and yeah, we are able to get those out at smaller size. Then with animation, I thought I'd just run through some of the different types. So the CSS, that's probably using the least energy. You can you'll need a developer to do it. But yeah, you can do quite simple things to just bring in a little bit of motion. We currently haven't used it, but it's something we may use in a future sprint just to bring in a little bit more motion, because obviously we do want to communicate our motion side of things. And then Lottie.js, so this is a specific kind of JavaScript animation, but they have developed it to keep the file size a lot lower, so it's around half the size of a GIF. And with your animator, an animator would be using After Effects body moving plugin to export in that format. GIF is quite high, but sometimes unavoidable. But if you can use something else, another thing you could swap is for an MP4. If it's something simple, MP4 might actually be smaller. Video, so we've mostly embedded, except for a couple of scenarios where we couldn't, but that will save you energy. If it's MP4, like try to get it under 3 meg. And another way is to reduce the length, or say you've got 1920 by 1080, don't just compress it at that. Look at the actual maximum size that you'll be displaying. So if your maximum width you'll ever see it is 600, say in a column width, export it at that and then compress it, and you could also shorten the length of it. Dark mode, this is something that we're looking at the moment in a sprint. So you can get a Chrome extension. There's a few others where you can view your site in dark mode, and it's less energy if it's in dark mode. So you can also set your site to force it into dark mode if your user has already set Chrome to do that when possible. So for example, looking at ours, we need to change our logo to the outlined one so it stands out. So yeah, that's a way you can have a look at how it is. And then I thought I'd run through some things that you can discuss with your developer or your template hosted site if it's that side of things. So the CMS, I mentioned before about installing the minimum. And there's so many different CMSs. Sometimes you might be able to influence the decision. Sometimes it might be your clients forcing you into a certain one. But either way, trying to just install only what you need rather than just ticking install everything, because that's the easiest thing to do. Green hosting, so read the small print. Some of them appear to be renewable energy, but they're actually not. They're carbon offsetting. So if you want to get one that is 100% renewables, make sure you read the small print and have discussions with them and make sure you find out what it's actually doing. And there's different types of hosting as well. It's so different for each project. Like a CDN, for example, is going to distribute globally your content through a variety of hosts, and then that will give you a quicker time in a certain location, but it might not necessarily be renewable. again, with frameworks, so install the minimum again. So if you're using something like Bootstrap, or you've got Materialize, Vue.js, again, just install what you need. Plugins, keep it to the minimum. Like, just as an example, I was looking earlier at WordPress, and they're advertising 59,580 free plugins. So I think definitely find out what plugins you're using. Can any of them be removed because you're no longer using them? Like, what's the long-term plan? Like, a lot of plugins will need regular updates. And then retrofitting, just because you know, if you've already got something built, that doesn't mean you can't improve it already. So yeah, definitely discuss all of that with them. Yeah, and with template sites, I'd say, yeah, contact their support teams and just ask them. Like, I had a chat with Shopify today, and they have switched to renewable hosting, so that's really great to hear. And yeah, some of the others are better than others. I won't go into too many details, but yeah, just definitely contact them and have a chat. There's also a really great site, which I'll share the link in a bit, but it's called Built With. So that's the way you can check what plugins your site is using, because sometimes you'll be surprised that there's some you didn't realize was still running. Okay, so just finish on a question. Do you think green hosting is the primary way to reduce a website's carbon emissions? Because I'd be really interested to know what people think. So it looks like we've got quite an even mix on the yes and no and the not sure. We've got a winner of yes. So the reason that I asked this is because I made a massive assumption that it would be, and I deliberately haven't discussed green hosting in detail because we're actually working on it in our current sprint now. So we've actually got down to that score without green hosting. So I think that does really highlight how much is in the design and the development and the content. We're hoping when we switch in this sprint that it's going to go even lower than 0.1. So we'll really be taking those emissions down as far as we can. So yeah, thank you all for listening, and it'd be great to hear your questions.
Hey, cool, thanks. Loving all the reactions that are coming up. But now all I can think about is every time one of those going off, are we using some emissions? But I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna close your slides. Stop sharing for a moment. And Jeff, sorry. Cool. So we're gonna go into some Q&A, and I have some questions. We had some questions to the chat, but I do want to offer up to the community, if you have questions and you want to do that, we can have you speak them out loud. You can queue on the side and say, I have a question. I'm gonna have Jeff mock it right now. So he'll go into the left and he'll say, I have a question. If you see on the left, there's oh, Jeff has a question, so I can give him the microphone. And he's going to turn the microphone off. But if he had a question, he could then ask it. So we'll start off with some ones I have and what's in the chat. But if anyone does have a question they'd like to ask Lizzie, feel free to queue up as well. So thanks so much for sharing your experience, kind of the journey that your company has been taking. And I was kind of wondering throughout all this of could you maybe talk a little bit more about and what you know about the decision as a company to move towards this direction, of wanting to move towards this direction, because I imagine it sounds like this is a company initiative and something that everyone's on board with, and I imagine that if that wasn't the case, that could be a more difficult kind of hurdle to get over in a way. So yeah, could you just tell me about like like from what you know, like what was more of like the company decision to try to move more in this direction?
Okay, yeah, I think it kind of organically happened, to be honest. I think over the last year in particular, all of us have kind of been researching our various interests, and I think we kind of discovered that they all really align. Like for me, my passion is very much sustainability, and it's what I've been researching. And then my boss is really into the accessibility side, and we're all kind of upskilling on that side. And then SEO, obviously, when I did the UX course with you guys as well about the product discovery and the assumption mapping and desirability testing. And I feel like it's just all kind of come towards the same realization that going more simple with everything is better. And I think we were starting to read some of the things we were writing and kind of question, are we actually doing that in our own work? And then we kind of started to realize, yeah, we can be more sustainable, we can be more accessible, we can, we can simplify everything, we can improve the SEO, we can get, more new projects, all across this. So yeah, I think it does help though being quite a small place. So I can't really compare it, for example, to like a big organization. I'm sure that might have more hoops to jump through. Yeah.
No, I think it's good to hear though that there was like a cohesive kind of desire for all of this. Like it wasn't coming necessarily just from one direction, but I think that's a lot of what kind of decisions can be made, and when there's buy-in from all different directions. So the developers and the designers and the owners and like CEOs are all kind of wanting to move in that same direction, then there's really when momentum can happen.
I would say one more thing as well from our developer's point of view. All of this makes his job easier because when I used to present these more creative, fancy sites, he's immediately like, oh no. Simpler is better. So I think so much of this is in the build that, I think you do need that synthesis with your developers as well.
Yeah, really nice. So we have some questions pinned in the chat. I'm gonna take from the audience as well. So how does this work on product pages? He says, or they say, example, Apple, like any product page, like, do you, within your research or understanding of like how this works beyond just websites in a way?
So I haven't actually tested Apple, but if you want, we could just test it now. Because their pages, from a visual design point of view, they are very much like people look to them for inspiration. So let's just have a look.
Yeah, why don't you share your screen again?
I'll share my screen and I will go to Apple and we'll look at some products and see what we find out. Let's look at the new MacBook Air. I'll just drag that over. Here we go. Okay, so I'll just put this up as well. So I'm gonna take that link and I'm gonna put it in the web calculator. It was last tested on the 25th of June, so we'll test again just to get an up-to-date.
So does that mean kind of maybe somebody else tested it, and so it's saying like this is the last time somebody else tested it, and they're giving you that data?
Yeah, it saves the data.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so this kind of gives a breakdown. So it is running on renewable energy, but yeah, it's less than average, but there's room for improvement. Let's have a look at the actual page. So we've got quite a lot of animation. It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because I think the biggest design challenge, especially for visual designers, is how do you create that impact and that engagement and the creativity but also in a sustainable way. And I personally think that's where we need to be focusing on. But yeah, I did see some of the other comments about, 3D is a big design trend, for example. But yeah, I personally would like to see, sites like awards, like actually building sustainability and accessibility into the way they score things, because then I think that will encourage designers to sort of focus on that. But yeah, I hope that helps.
Yeah, that kind of actually gets at one of these other questions, which is somebody, Erin asks, she says, thanks, Lizzie, for this great information. I'd love to hear how you discuss this topic with team members who don't think simplicity equals business goals. There's so much trends with the fun design that sounds like it uses so much energy. How do you balance like delightful design with sustainability? How have you been thinking about it? Yeah, you kind of started to talk about it, but like, how have you kind of grappled with these ideas?
I think me personally, I've always questioned delight when we talk about it in UX, because I sometimes think, do we really need it in the way that we've been thinking about it until now? Because like, if I just go and do a functional thing, I want to do it quickly and easily, but I don't necessarily need an all singing or dancing thing to make me feel happy about it. But I also understand from the brand point of view that they want us to have that nice customer experience. So yeah, it's a real hard one, I'm not gonna lie. I think this is quite a challenge for all of us, really, how to balance this. Yeah, I think that's partly why we went down the text route with having things like emojis and those little touches, and to kind of bring the brand out, because yeah, it's a real challenge, especially if people also want that creative expression. I was thinking about this today, and I was wondering if perhaps some of these sites where they are really pushing the tech to its limits, we do still need that, but perhaps it's more from a portfolio perspective. So it's something you do, and then you share your learnings, share it on GitHub or whatever, and then you take it offline. Like, it doesn't necessarily need to stay and be this award-winning site, because also it's not accessible to people. So you're leaving a lot of people out. So yeah, not the most succinct answer, but it's there's so many challenges at the moment to get it all together.
Yeah, I think it's hard. It's definitely a hard balance between like what is a fun thing that somebody wants to try, so a designer, developer, like anyone, versus like, is it like, first, like the usability of it, like is this like delightful or frustrating? Like, one of my most frustrating pet peeves on websites is when like you scroll and it doesn't actually go anywhere, it just like changes the animation in a different way. And it sometimes just feels like a gimmick more than like, I'm not sure what's the purpose of it, like who is this helping, and yeah, I mean, maybe that's just my pet peeve of that kind of website. But, yeah, I think it's a hard balance, and so I think has there, with like in connection to thinking about the kind of business goals, at the simplicity and sustainability aspects of kind of moving in this area, have there been conversations at all or talks about like how this kind of thinks about the business like aspects of it, like the concerns of getting new clients, especially as like a motions like work that you do? Has there been any conversation about like how the perception of this kind of website, maybe with like as the goal of simplifying it in sustainability, like what that kind of have talked like brand wise too?
Yeah, I personally haven't been involved in those conversations if they've happened, so I'm not sure. I do know that we're focusing on making the motion side more accessible. So with a lot of the captioning and that sort of side of it, less flashy stuff, things that can trigger people who've got different conditions and but yeah, I'm not really on the animation side myself.
And how long ago, you guys just did this, correct? Like not that long ago?
Yeah, it's been in the last couple of months. We decided on like a really short, quick deadline. Like we just want to do something that we know that we can iterate, and it's a starting point. Which is quite a switch in my mind as well. Where at the previous site, I think there was this sort of big sort of team thing of like, we're building this thing and it's the finished thing. Whereas I think this time it was very much, this is the starting point, and then we'll do some experiments, we'll see where we're going. We're going to be changing it all the time. It's not, and with it being simple, it's easy to do that. Whereas before we had lots of JavaScript and things, like if we wanted to change it drastically, it would be really difficult.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a really nice way to kind of not be fearful of putting it out there and seeing how people are actually reacting to it, not just keeping it safe and getting internal perspectives on it, but like putting it out there. Are you guys tracking, like, how are you thinking about, like, are you tracking any kind of metrics or any sort of, like, how are you kind of gauging like what you maybe would qualify as success?
We're tracking with Google Analytics and Tag Manager certain things, particularly around some of the use of the videos, where we have video embeds and different user goals. I'm personally not involved in setting those, but I know that we are doing that.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, because I think it's like too soon to even kind of know what effect this has had in a way. Yeah. I see somebody, I'm going to send the mic over to Kimmy. She has a question. Hey, Kimmy, can you?
Yeah, can anyone hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Hi, Lizzie. Thank you for the great session. Well, I had a question. Since we have voice-enabled searches and AR coming in, so does that affect, what we were talking about, sustainability, and how much?
So I would imagine the voice search wouldn't affect it in a negative way, because that's a real good accessibility feature. The AR I'm not sure about, but I can imagine that AR would use up a lot of energy. I can imagine that it involves a lot more, but I don't know specifically.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Kimmy, for jumping on the mic, jumping in. I'm going to take another one of the questions that we have pinned in the chat as well. Do you, like, the question is, which websites do you think are actively managing emissions and practicing sustainability for their products? Have you come across people like that you find as like kind of North Stars or people you look towards in this area?
Yeah, definitely. I do go to sites like Whole Grain Digital and quite a few of their science and clients. There's also the Sustainability Web Manifesto, which you can sign and just kind of commit that you're going to be involved in this strategy. I can pop some links as well in the chat. There's also, I've just seen literally in the last couple of days, there's a sort of Designers Declare movement where they're it's a UK-based agency kind of network, but they're kind of gathering up agencies that are kind of willing to commit to going in this direction, and to kind of share resources. So those are some.
Yeah, thanks. I think Jeff is on the link of putting those in there for us.
Let me see if I can find Sustainable Web Manifesto.
Yeah, well, I want to say thank you. I'm going to end the Q&A here. I really appreciate all of sharing kind of the really recent experience that you're going through with your company. We'd love to kind of check in 6 months and see how things are going, how things have changed. We are going to open up some breakout rooms in just a few minutes, but I'd love to give if you guys want to, I'd love to give Lizzie another round of applause and thank you so much.